Okay, well, here we are, another episode of Church Chat.
Church Chat.
And we are so happy to welcome special guest Rick Anderson.
Yay!
Yay,
Rick Anderson, welcome to the podcast.
Unrehearsed, unscripted.
That's always
Only way we do it.
Only way we roll.
Otherwise,
Sometimes
it would be
it gets us in trouble.
So, we've known each other for 8 years now.
At least, yeah.
Yeah.
That's right.
And Rick was on our PNC.
Which is like the committee that hires pastors.
Yeah. So, this has been, it's been a long...
It's been a
And
journey.
I feel like, Rick, when we met you, didn't you have a cast? Like you had fallen off a motorcycle or something? Am I
Was
imagining
that
this?
when that was?
Yeah, did you fall off a motorcycle and have a cast at one point?
Actually, well, if it's the timing's right, I fell off a bicycle and had 2 fractured elbows.
That's right. That's what it was. Yeah,
And it was
you
like
had an arm cast.
like,
It was like this.
Yeah.
oh, man.
I just remember you had a cast and you had done something adventurous and were
Oh
like
my
injured when we
goodness,
first
that
met
was
you.
8
What's
years
wrong with
ago.
me that I don't remember that at all?
And I remember
I'm so
like
self-absorbed.
and all of Rick's questions were about mission, which I thought was so cool. Like you just like had really focused
I
in
must
on
have
like
come fresh off something.
the mission of the church.
Yeah, it must have been a hot topic. Must have been a hot topic.
No, it was awesome though. I just remember being like thinking you
Yeah.
were awesome like as soon as
I
we met you.
remember that.
And how long have you been at the church, Rick? Oh,
Well,
what did I do?
let's see. Blue is now 27.
Oh, my gosh.
I know.
What?
27-year-old?
I know. And Miranda's 24. So I mean, 21 years, 22 years, something like
Okay.
that. That's how I gauge it by the kids'
Yeah.
age. Because that's when we start coming. But yeah, that long.
Okay. So it started coming when the kids came around.
Yeah, when they were old enough to get involved in the children's ministry and stuff like that. That's when we
Alright.
started.
But, you're in the elite club of parents that stuck after their kids graduated.
That's
So a lot of
Yeah,
parents
that's true.
graduate from the church when their
Bail.
kids graduate
Yeah.
from the youth group.
I get it.
So one of them won't even respond to my emails. Like they're just done. They're like, we're done. Our kids have graduated. We're done.
Who is that?
No, we're not going to call people out on the podcast.
Let's call them out.
We're just going to start bringing a list of names that we read like grievances at the start of every podcast.
Yeah, list of grievances.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, in all honesty, when your wife is in the praise team,
Yeah.
you either sit at home on Sunday morning alone, or you become part of the program. So,
And you guys are amazing because you do those late night Saturday events at your lot too. And then you're still here on Sunday morning. So like no one else has an excuse.
Cheryl, I don't know how she gets her energy. I don't know. She's nuts. She worked last night at Fiddler's, and she was out the door this morning before I woke up,
Oh, man.
Wow.
going downtown.
For those of you guys that don't know, that Anderson, Cheryl's also an amazingly talented musician, and in addition to working with the homeless all
Yeah.
day, and Rick owns the best car lot in Central Florida.
The
Good
best one in
cars.
Fern Park, at least.
Carsforgoodpeople.com.
That's
That's not a plug.
Woo, woo.
You can pay us later for that.
You can sponsor this podcast.
Yeah.
All right.
So we Rick's here today because we just want to have folks on the podcast, and Rick said yes. But so anyone, if you want to come, sit on the couch, we'd love to talk to you too.
We'd love that.
But so we emailed Rick last week or 2 weeks ago,
It was over a week ago because I was up
Yeah.
in Georgia. Yeah.
and said, hey, when you come on the podcast, and what would you like to talk about? And so you were at that time you were doing something really cool.
Yeah. Tell us more about that.
All right. So I went to a monastery in Conyers, Georgia.
Wow.
Went with my neighbor, Rusty Daddis, who attends the Catholic Church on Maitland Avenue, St. Mary Magdalene. And it's something that his priest, I guess is what a Catholic priest is,
Okay.
mentioned to him years ago before COVID. And then COVID shut the guest options down at that monastery.
Right.
And when they resumed them, we started talking about it again, and we finally went.
Wow.
And we went the Tuesday after Easter, which we learned is probably the slowest point of the year for that monastery, because
Okay.
Easter being like Super Bowl Sunday,
Right.
it was very busy around there prior to it, and it's a big production on Easter. And
Even at a monastery.
yeah, well, I guess people from the area. I don't think they changed their program and how they do things.
Okay.
I just think
Okay.
the attendance from the locals who are not regulars.
Right.
They're looking for someplace special on Easter, and that place is pretty special.
Yeah.
So, so we went 2 days after that, and from what I understand, it was a very slow time for them.
Okay.
And I guess it could house, or as many as a couple hundred people can stay there at one time as
Oh, wow.
guests.
So it's big.
Oh, it's big. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a whole section for, and churches use it as groups.
Okay.
In different Christian. It's something to think
Maitland
about.
Press field trip.
I'm
right?
telling you, yeah.
I'm totally in.
Well, so it's total silence, though. You're asked to
Wow.
the language that's. I know, right? We were just talking about it. So the language spoken is silence. That's the
Wow.
deal.
Like you don't talk to anybody all day.
That's the key. Yeah. I mean,
At all.
you could hear kitchen people talking in the back.
Okay.
Here and there, but the courtesy, the respect in the building
Right.
is silence.
Wow.
And once you go outside the building and walk the grounds, or you're in the elevator, there's a small elevator. Rusty and I were chatting back and forth,
Okay.
but just try to respect it. That's the rule.
Wow.
But the monks live on that property. They live in a different section that we had no access to. And we learned about their life and their dedication and all of the things I used to make fun of, as you could. And that's another thing we're going to talk about, I think, is the different religions and how people practice whatever. But,
Yeah.
Catholicism is something that seemed very ritualistic to me, and I don't think it's something that I could do long term. But after watching it in action, I have a different level of respect for it.
That's
I mean,
awesome.
I know it's not for me, but I respect it. It's interesting.
How many worship services do they have a day?
6.
How many did you go to?
We average 3.
Okay.
Hey,
We
that's
average
pretty
3.
good.
Yeah.
A day.
Yeah, and it's in this thing called the Abbey. So their I guess their sanctuary is the word for it is Abbey, and the top dog, the
Abbott.
Abbot,
Oh.
the elected. So the monks themselves elect these leaders for 7 years. They're 7-year terms unless there's something that interferes, and that person's called the abbot, and the abbot is the grand poobah of the monastery.
Wow.
So it was interesting. And so as guests, we were allowed to attend as many, or there's no rule. The only rule is silence.
Okay.
So you're there for your own, whatever you can get out of it. And so you could wake up at 4 a.m. with the monks and do a prayer vigil if you so chose, which I never did. And then it goes to a 7:30 service, to a noon service, to a 4:30, to a something, and then it ends with what they call a compline at 7:30. And the actual way they worship is these monks. Inside the abbey, they break into these 2 teams, I guess you would call them. There's pews on the right and pews on the left, and we as guests are sitting there looking at this magnificent place. By the way, it's just gorgeous.
Yeah.
And they chant psalms back and forth.
Cool. So that's the only thing they say all day
Wow.
is to
Yes.
chant the psalms. That's cool.
Now, and as I
Wow.
understand it, when they're in their section and they're eating and they're going about their day, they're not talking. So they get to the church and they chant these psalms back and forth, and it's kind of spooky.
Right.
But if you allow yourself to get into the zone, it can be.
I think we should take a church visit.
I think we should take a church field
and,
trip.
And I was so encouraged by some of the stuff I read on property that they're very, which is what I was misled about, at least what I thought was Catholicism as a rule. But this particular monastery, they're open to anyone. You can be
Wow.
a non-believer
Wow.
and stay there.
That's so neat.
I know it.
That's really cool.
And they just want to. It's just open, and they don't really have a whole lot of rules about it.
What
And
was like your room like in the monastery? Pretty
very
simple. Yeah.
very modest. There was a single bed,
Okay.
which was probably a B rating. It wasn't my best sleep, but and a small desk and a window.
Cool.
Okay.
And that was it. And
Huh.
and Rusty was across the hallway, and we shared a bathroom, and it was humbling to be in that room, and just looking out the window over the property. It was something that I was not used to, obviously, with my day-to-day madness.
Right.
And it puts you in a different zone. It really does. And then you go into that abbey and you watch them shuffle in with their very primitive clothing and sandals, and they chant back and forth, and the guy goes up to the lectern and he clicks the switch and it just echoes through the whole thing, and there's candles, and it's so elaborate that
That's amazing.
it just gets your attention.
Yeah.
You know,
Wow.
Totally different than your day
totally
to day.
different.
Right.
And the chanting I read in a book on property, much like meditation of any kind, whether it's yoga or something Hindus do in a group or like a gong session, the chanting, I guess, gets them into a zone, or gets even the audience into a zone, and you just, it's less about self and it's more about elevating to a different spiritual place or whatever.
Wow.
That's really neat.
This is so cool.
I know.
I know.
I'm ready to go.
I had zero expectations going in. I didn't know what we were in
I was
for.
going to ask, like, what'd you expect going in? Nothing? Didn't know?
But as we pulled up, and I got pictures of it, it looked like an old creepy building out of one of those scary movies.
No kidding.
You know, yeah. I mean, the outside is just old and weathered, and you know, and then it's just like, what are we doing here? Is this some, you know, are we part of a movie or something?
Right.
And then you walk inside, and it's just modest stuff from the 70s. That monastery, by the way, the oldest one in the United States is in Kentucky.
Okay.
And I forget the name of it, and it's hard to get into. I think they do the same thing with guests, but you can't ever get a reservation. So this one, and that was founded in the 1800s, and this one is a faction of that in 1944, 21 monks were approved to go and, I guess, evangelize, if nothing else, but try to spread the gospel that way. They're going to build a second monastery, and they chose Conyers, Georgia.
Neat.
And it is what it is now. It's a fascinating place.
That's great. So you were there. You got an invitation to be on the podcast. I said, "What do you want to talk about?" And you said, "Well, monks." And I was like, "Well, I
So
want to think about monks."
Dave's asking me, "What do you want to talk about?" I said, "Well, I got a curious subject here," and it was about the monks. And Dave,
That's fantastic.
yeah. And so I learned a little.
Yeah.
And there's way more to learn. But what I did learn is, and by the way, you can also do what they call a residency program for a month. You can live amongst them.
Wow.
Live with them and do their
Amongst
amongst the monks, huh? You like that? And
no.
and you know, they work. That's part. So they're under the Saint Benedictine rule.
Okay.
That's this. I guess every monastery chooses.
Yeah, there's different kinds.
Okay,
Yeah.
So this is Saint Benedictine, and I read they have a museum there, which is pretty
I've
fascinating.
got a
too.
copy of the Rule of Saint Benedict,
right.
Saint Benedict on the shelf there.
Well, one major component of his is work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, there's like 3 components, and obviously God's number 1, and work, and then maybe worship's number 3.
And isn't like a lifetime commitment one of them?
Yes. No, dude, when you're in, you're in. If they accept you, if you go there and you're then accepted as a monk, your commitment is till you die.
Wow.
It's and they say it's commitment with God, and that's the way it is. And so on that property, I can't remember the exact number. It was either 40, and it might have been 90 monks live there, but a lot of them are like in infirmary. They're in poor health, and they're just going to finish their days there.
So there weren't a lot of young monks on the property?
No,
No.
it sounds like a program, doesn't it? The Young Monks.
It's like a show on BBC or something.
I call band name.
But no, I'd say the youngest one that was in the abbey chanting might have been in his mid-30s or 40s.
Okay.
Yeah, but most of them.
Anything younger than me is pretty young.
Dude, right.
That's where we set the line. Younger than me is young.
That's what I used to say. And now most people are younger than me. But I would say most of them were 50 plus, and a lot of them were 60 and even 70 plus.
Okay.
And they all dress simple. They eat simple. They all have chosen a trade because they have to work.
Right.
Okay.
And whether it's making bread or fudge or digging a field or whatever, they all have a job.
Wow.
And then they all have to.
I'd much rather make fudge than dig a field.
Yeah, I'm thinking so too. I know. But they had, one thing in the Benedictine thing was looking out for the elders. And as collectively, they do that. And one of the monks was brought in a wheelchair every time. And he was all hunched over. But he still did his chanting.
Okay.
He was still there. Another guy walked in with a cane, and he was clicking the cane all the way in and could barely walk. And there was all different skin colors, several different nationalities represented in that group, and the 1 or 2 nuns that we did see, they sat in those chanting pews, but they didn't chant. They just observed or listened or whatever.
Interesting.
Yeah. And one more thing, I was always under the impression that Catholicism, they don't use the Bible in their services, or someone told me that one time. I don't know.
Okay.
But that's not true there.
No, it's not true across the board.
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think what people tend to say is that on the whole, Catholic, your average Catholic church member doesn't always have a Bible in their home.
Oh, okay.
Or isn't like, it's not
Got
the
it.
same emphasis we put on it.
Yep.
But that kind of brings up the big thing we want to talk about, which, I mean, I'm glad we talked about monks, because
That was fantastic.
Man.
Yeah, that was such
It
a cool
was fun.
experience.
I'm ready to go.
I
I'm ready to go,
recommend it
too.
if you guys, if anybody's even on the fence,
Yeah.
just let me know.
But what's it cost a night?
So very affordable.
Yeah.
I think for the 3 nights, my total charge was like $370.
Okay.
And they fed you and stuff?
Yes.
Okay.
3 meals a day.
Wow.
It's open for an hour, and you either eat what they have or you don't eat.
Yeah.
And it's
What
pretty
was the food
simple.
like? Was it pretty simple?
B plus, B plus.
Okay.
There was a great salad bar every evening with the freshest stuff. It was
Nice.
so, you know,
Okay.
I could have lived on that.
Yeah.
And then some kind of simple soup or pasta type thing.
Yeah.
And breakfast was, you know,
We gotta check it out.
but
Yeah, this sounds really cool. I'd
but
love to go.
and before we get off this,
Yeah.
Rusty and I both acknowledged on the third day, and the third day was rainy and it was kind of
Yeah.
weird, you know, and it was just a way different experience than the first 2 days. But when you have nothing to do, you don't even have, I mean, zero on your agenda, it changes things. And, you know, it could probably be good or bad wherever you let your mind take you. But when you don't even have to decide what to eat, you don't have to decide, you know, worry about caring for the pool or the dog or nothing.
Right.
There is nothing on your schedule. That allows you some mental freedom to go places.
Wow.
And even on a mission trip, you know, with the kids,
There's a lot.
there's a lot of tasks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's no tasks.
There are no Yeah.
You could lay in your bed all day. There's no, you know, you could walk the property all day. You could you could be in the Abbey all day. We had special access to it. There was a separate entrance for the residents, and so that was when you have nothing on your plate. Where do you go with it? That's the question, and that's
fascinating. It's like you're going 90 miles an hour and then all of a sudden you're standing still, and it just,
Yeah.
what do you do with that mental and physical space?
right.
Oh, yeah.
is awesome.
That could be wonderful and terrifying, I think, for
Absolutely,
anybody, right?
absolutely, yes,
Like,
absolutely,
fantastic, but also it would give your brain a chance to kind of wander.
yeah, yeah.
Oh,
and
wow. That is
Yeah.
really cool.
That is really cool. It definitely makes me want to go.
Yeah.
It's
Man, we should totally do
and
that.
it's affordable. It's
Yeah.
for the value. I mean,
Yeah.
I'd do it again.
I think the hardest part would be if we took a church trip is not talking.
Oh,
Like
man,
people
our
not
people
talking to
can't
each
be
other.
quiet
Our people
on
I
can't
know.
handle
the
it.
end of Good Friday service.
Yeah.
We stopped putting in the bulletin because you're like, leave in silence. They're like, no.
It's like the most friendly, chatty group of people in the world. So I think that people would be in the halls like,
Oh yeah.
I know we're not supposed to talk, but what did you think of the lunch? It was so good, right?
Yeah.
Like people
Yeah.
would be chit-chatting in the halls. How are you doing? Are you doing
Maitland
okay?
Press would get a C minus probably.
Yeah.
For-
Yeah.
for being
Maitland-
silenced then.
We'd be asked not to return.
Yeah.
Yeah, silence is not our forte.
Not our strongest suit, maybe. Like at one point, we had kind of a debacle at the church because people were concerned that people were talking too much in the line to come up and take communion. Because everyone files into the
Yeah,
center
yeah,
to walk
it-
up to the
it-
front.
the conversation
and it was
going on.
becoming like, you know, just social time, walking up the center aisle. It didn't bother us too much, but we had some members being like, can you tell them to be quiet? Like, it's communion.
There's no real way to work shut up into the communion liturgy, you know?
No, it's not possible. So
Well-
then we just started having a lot of music during it and hoping that we could, like, drown out the chatter. I don't know.
Well, there lies one of the differences, and I think we're going that direction with this conversation. Like, so at that monastery in the Abbey, they do Eucharism every morning. So that's the
Okay.
Eucharism, fancy name for
Eucharist.
communion. Eucharist. There you go. Told you. They do that every morning, and if you're not Catholic, you're asked not to participate.
Right.
Which I read in length in one of the things also, unless you can get a special exception from the bishop, which I put my request in. I didn't get an answer, but I'm joking. But anyway, there's no joking going on inside that place.
Right.
I mean, everybody
Right.
is stoic. Oh
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
And they're not talking to each other on the way up.
Right.
Yeah.
It's pretty serious business. So
Yeah, a whole different approach to communion.
Totally.
Catholics and Presbyterians, and what we believe about it and what it is and what it means. And
Perfect segue, too, because
Yes.
the thing that Rick actually, that we landed on is we want to talk about ecumenicism.
which is a word I saw in the in the museum they have on property.
Yeah.
And I've heard the word before, and I still can't say it, but give me a brief definition.
Yeah.
So it's the way that Christians relate to other Christians of other traditions. So, Catholics and Protestants, or, Presbyterians and Baptists, or
Correct.
things like that. So it's all
Presbyterians and other kinds of Presbyterians.
Yeah.
Like,
Thank you. So, yeah, and
so there's certain churches that we are almost interchangeable with each other
Yep.
as far as the way we view each other, and there's some where, like you said, you can come, but you can't have communion.
Yep.
So yeah.
which is different on our side, though. Like, if a Catholic comes to a Presbyterian church, they can take communion with us. But if we go to a Catholic church, we can't take with them.
But they shouldn't tell their priest they did.
Oh,
they
really?
might,
Did they get in trouble?
They might get in trouble for it.
Okay.
who,
I did not know
who would
that.
get in trouble? Who?
The Catholic.
The Catholic who took
if
it
they
with us.
took it.
might
Oh,
get
no
in
kidding?
trouble.
Yeah.
Really?
As far as I know.
Okay.
Fact check me. I probably should. We should have someone actively fact checking
Be like,
in real
get
time.
Marianne in here. She's Catholic.
We need a fact checker.
Yeah.
But yeah, I could be wrong. I'm probably wrong. But yeah, so
But anyway,
ecumenicism
ecumenicism. I said
Yeah.
or ecumenical.
ecumenical.
Yeah.
But isn't it, as I read it in this museum, it's the desire or the will of these different Christian religions to find common ground, for lack of a better word.
Yeah.
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 Well, and God's desire for us to do that too.
Yeah.
That Jesus' prayer for us is that we would all be one. And it wasn't just talking about us Presbyterians.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And one way we do that, I think, is through the creeds. Like we share some of these creeds. Like the Apostles' Creed is said in a lot of kinds of different churches, so our worship might look different, but we all say the same creed.
But then, that's when they start breaking down. It's like,
Yeah, that's when it starts getting ugly.
So the Catholics have their own version of the Nicene Creed from us. So I did a little research.
Okay.
So as Presbyterians, here's the list of other denominations that we are in full communion with.
Okay.
Oh boy.
So that means
Oh,
that
boy.
we can trade pastors. We have all the same sacraments. So we have a covenant with covenant relationship Korean Presbyterian Church,
All right.
the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, which is the big Lutheran denomination, Moravian Church, although there's a Moravian Reformed Covenant Partnership, the Reformed Church in America, and the United Church of Christ.
Okay.
But the Lutherans are like the kings of ecumenical relationships. So
Okay.
they have all those. Plus, they also have full communion with the Episcopals and the Methodists. So if we ever want to get together and have a service with Episcopals and Methodists, we have to have a Lutheran there.
Okay.
So that.
It's like when you want to buy an airline ticket and say you have to go into like the alliance of like, well, Delta points can be used with Virgin
Yeah, there you go.
Atlantic.
Yeah.
You gotta have the middleman to get there.
Yeah.
Okay.
Really?
Yeah, so if you ever want to hang out with a Methodist, you have to make sure there's a Lutheran there.
Well,
To sit between
I'll check their card.
right now, in
On the
this
way
thing, I'm the Lutheran, and you're the Methodist, and you're a Presbyterian. I don't know why we
Perfect.
don't have a full communion with Methodists. We should talk to Megan and Dave about that.
Yeah, Megan and Dave are friends of ours who are
Wait a minute, you
co-pastors
guys talking in third person now?
in Methodist Church.
No,
No, for real.
It's
a clergy couple.
I know we've had this conversation.
Clergy couple in Sanford, Megan and Dave.
They're the best.
They're
And
the young, cool Megan and Dave.
Yeah, which I really resent. But if they weren't such wonderful people, it would be.
It's hard to resent them, yeah.
Yeah, but so then there's any church that's not on that list for us, we're not in full communion with, and some of it is on their side. So we have an official Catholic Reformed dialogue going on.
Okay.
And there's similar ones, but so a lot of it is to do with churches that we are more recent splits are usually a little more testy,
Of course.
and then but the older ones, there's not a whole lot to bridge the gap, but
Well, there lies the rub with me.
Okay.
And I struggle with it as far as having faith and why we can have so many divisions under a pretty common theme.
Right.
And again, to be at what is considered a pretty strict Roman Catholic monastery, I guess is what you would label it, to have them mention that word and be part of their, I don't know, will, I guess.
Right.
It was encouraging.
Yeah.
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 Even though they still have that distinction about Eucharism, but at least the desire to find common ground
Yeah.
with other Christian religions. That was the key.
Yeah.
I guess they're not looking to find common ground with non-Christian religions, but
Okay.
but that's the whole point of the word, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Ecumenical is just within
the Christian community.
capital C church.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
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 But I guess that part of our divides are about things like communion.
Yeah.
And let's look at like baptism. Like our big divide within Presbyterian churches is actually not almost all Reformed churches. You have to baptize infants. But there are churches, there's Baptist churches where, I guess they're still kind of Reformed. Anyway, it's
we can baptize adults, but like you can't say I won't baptize a baby in the Presbyterian church. That
Right.
like Presbyterians can't, like the parents could say we're gonna wait,
Yeah.
but we as pastors could never say like I won't baptize the baby. I have to wait till they make a profession of faith,
Oh,
because
gotcha.
that's not what we believe about baptism. Where Catholics are definitely pro infant baptism.
Yeah.
And probably more than we are. Like our exact language is we baptize without undue haste or delay. So we're not waiting until a profession of faith, but we're also not like running into the hospital to do a quick baptism just in case. Like we're kind of in a middle ground.
Yeah, so our big divide with the Catholics is probably more to do with communion. Well, and, how many sacraments there are and
Being part of the Reformation.
yeah, the whole...
Really started back there.
That's a big one.
Yeah. That whole like which side we took on the Reformation thing is pretty critical.
But even
Yeah.
moving on from Catholicism, I mean, like you mentioned in your thing about who accepts who, again, that's where I personally struggle with religion.
Okay. Yeah.
And I just, and I guess the same could spill over into politics. Are you looking for things you agree on or things you disagree on? And when it comes to things about God, I'm not particularly fond of pointing out the differences.
Yeah.
Let's
Focus on what we have in common.
yeah.
We've been talking some about getting together at like a group of churches and even interfaith, like not just Christian churches, but also like the other groups,
Synagogues
the
and-
synagogues in
Yeah.
our town,
The
and
mosque.
the mosque, to come around together about mission things. Like, okay, what is everyone doing to help the homeless population in Central Florida, and how can we, instead of duplicating efforts, be like working together?
Yeah.
And then that group could be a place where like the city of Maitland could come and say, okay, we have this social issue, and then we'd have all these leaders in the Maitland, Winter Park, Eatonville areas to come together, at least to say we may not agree about everything theologically, but we all have these common issues, like we have to help the poor almost across the board.
Yep.
That's a key tenet.
Yep.
So how could we work together? And maybe coming together on conversations about starting with what we agree with would help bridge the gap over the things that we don't.
And to talk more graciously about the things we disagree with.
Yeah.
Disagree about.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it just becomes,
Testy.
testy,
Yeah.
and people don't...
And they shut down.
Yeah.
As soon as the
Yeah.
one difference comes up, they shut down, and forgetting about the big picture or the main thing that we do agree.
Right.
Now we're going to argue about something in policy, although we still agree on the main point.
Yeah.
And that bothers me a little bit.
Which happens
I really
best in
struggle with-
relationship, for sure, right? Which is what's so cool about you and your friend. Like, he's Catholic, you're Protestant. You
right.
go to a monastery together, have this experience
Yeah.
of faith. Like, it seemed to me that that's where it starts in bridging these gaps, is in real relationship and common experiences, and that you guys both have a very shared faith, just with a different dialect on it of how you speak it.
And he was raised Baptist, by the way, and
Was he?
And through his marriage went to Catholicism. So he's got his own. He's got his own.
He's been all over.
Oh,
Yeah,
he's all
that's
over
a
the
big
place.
move,
Yeah.
Baptist to Catholic.
Yeah. So it's
Wow.
pretty
Even
funny.
just in the style of worship, often
Big
that
time.
would feel really, really
Yeah,
different.
usually when a Baptist and a Catholic get married, they become Presbyterian.
Yeah.
I'll talk to him
That's
about
true.
that. I'll talk to him about
Sounds
that.
That's very
like it was a
true.
non-negotiable. It's like, you will become Catholic.
Oh, it was.
Yeah.
It was.
But that could be like our tagline, like, we're kind of in the middle. Like, we have people that just kind of, they meet in the middle, and we're like a little bit of both, so it works out for them.
Yeah.
So I was at a Bible study last Wednesday, and it happens at noon, and it's led by a guy, very good friend of mine, who knows the book cover to cover, and it's just amazing how he can tie in Old Testament prophecy with and brings it together, with a verse out of his head, and it's
Yeah.
crazy how he does it, because we studied both. But one of the guys brought, and by the way, it's a huge different age variation within this group, probably about 10 to 12 guys, and probably 4 or 5 different churches represented, and
Wow.
a couple former pastors, and it's neat. But one of the guys brought up about how he says, listen, I know you're going to get mad at me for this. He says, and this guy brings up great
How
questions.
all good sentences.
Yeah. And he goes, and you're not going to like it because I'm fine with my Christian faith, and I know I'm very secure in how I feel about it. But, and he's got this kind of whiny voice, and he's saying, wonder if God communicates to other religions as a way to get his message to them that's different from Christians. And my friend Greg, who runs this thing, you could feel his teeth starting to grind. And this guy Vinny goes on and goes down this rabbit hole about, hey, listen, I'm not saying that they're right, and I'm not saying that something non-Christian would work for me, but wonder if God is so big that we don't comprehend, and his way of getting to those people is through that type of message. And in the end, and he's going down this whole thing. And then, of course, Greg at the end says, well, I go by what it says in the book, tough guy. and I don't see it anywhere in the book. So, but just that kind of that thinking, to be able to discuss that without someone flying off the handle.
It's so important to have those conversations. And I think I'm probably with your friend here who was like, what if God, God's so big. Like, I know that the way that God got a hold of me was through the Christian witness of who Jesus was and is and all of that.
Right.
But I don't feel like it's up to me to put God in a box and say, this is the only thing that can be is what I like my experience of God and my revelation. Like, who am I to say that and so
which is exactly his point.
Yeah, all I can teach is what I know, and so I'll share with people the gospel that I know because it's the way that God's spoken to me. But that's where I get uncomfortable is saying like that I have to say that anything else is absolutely out of bounds. Like I'm not comfortable in that space.
Well, and I think about this sometimes. God isn't religious. We're religious.
Yeah.
And people have always been religious.
Yeah.
And so maybe that's, God loves us so much that he comes to us through religion, and so, I think, I'm a fully committed Christian, same way that I'm a fully devoted husband.
Yeah.
But you're not, but to put that on God, that God's up there,
yeah, and that was this guy Vinny's point. He's like, I'm not saying it's even the way it is. He goes, but the fact to say there's zero possibility that someone else can be reached through something other than Christianity is something that I can't sit with. And he would, and then you could see the wheels start spinning in the room and people got quiet, and it was toward the end of but it was an interesting thing for someone to put out there in a Bible study.
That's good.
Well, and one thing we really believe as Reformed, as true Christians, is that we come to faith because God gives us faith. That it's not really our choice, that God, that we're touched, and so you don't become a Christian because you lost the argument, or because you were you're only defeated by God.
Good point.
And so we can really have these conversations with people of any denomination or any faith, because it's not on us to make anybody believe what we believe. God's the one who draws people to faith, and so we can just trust God with that.
Yeah. And like I said, maybe it is beyond our comprehension as humans.
Yeah.
Maybe it's bigger than that. And this little thing between our ears, we think we understand everything, and quite possibly we don't.
Yeah, I'm much more comfortable with worshiping a God who knows a lot more than I do.
Yeah.
Than a God with whom I am equally yoked intellectually.
Yeah.
No, wait, God, you're not seeing this right.
Right.
Let me explain it to you.
I'm much more comfortable with God being bigger than I understand, and I am fully confident there will be a lot of surprises when we meet God someday.
Right.
That we are seeing at best just a tiny little through a tiny keyhole into what the real picture is.
So I had one more unique experience in the past month, maybe a little more than a month. But Cheryl and I went to New York City for St. Patrick's Day.
Oh, wow. That unique experience. New York City,
great.
St. Patrick's Day.
It was fantastic.
Oh, my gosh.
Fantastic. But we stayed at a place on West 57th Street, which is a very great high-end area.
Okay.
But we stayed in an old home that is a Christian house. And it's used for worship. And the only way you can stay there is if you are in some sort of Christian ministry that you can prove
Wow.
because they
Cool.
vet you
Okay.
to stay there.
Yeah.
So with Cheryl being at Compassion Corner, I put the application in, and they accepted it. And we stayed on the 5th floor of this building that's over 100 years old on the Upper West Side, and no elevator.
Wow,
5th
yeah.
floor, shared bathroom at the end of the hallway. Clean, but in 2 single beds in the room we stayed in, by the way.
Boy, you really know how to treat Cheryl right.
I mean, the best sleep she's had in a long time. But so very,
Surprise!
very economical financially to stay
Right,
there. Okay, similar to the monastery. I
Yeah.
mean, we stayed 3 nights on the Upper West Side. This is 2 blocks from where John Lennon was shot.
Wow.
And I mean, we stayed there for less than $500.
Wow. That's great.
And the building itself was fascinating, and they have different small churches rent their space. So on Sunday morning when we checked out, there was a church service that was really
wow.
cool. Guy playing a
Okay.
piano, and probably 15 people there.
Cool.
The night we arrived, there was a youth group. I did speak to Jonathan about this, but there was a youth group that had been there for the week and with their leaders. And they were doing different mission projects within the city through the
Neat.
churches right there.
Fantastic.
But anyway, the reason where I'm going with this is somehow there's a woman who lives on property with her husband and 2 kids. She kind of cares for the house. And somehow through conversation, I mentioned where we live. And she goes, "Oh, no kidding. So-and-so is on the board." And I said, "Well, who's so-and-so?" "Well, so-and-so is one of the directors at Orangewood Presbyterian.
Oh yeah.
Right around the corner." I said, "No way," blah, blah, blah. So
Small
anyway,
world, yeah.
Anyway, she hooks us up on email, and we go back and forth about a couple common people that we know. And it gets down, on the 3rd or 4th exchange, where do you worship? Maitland Pres. Crickets after that. so,
shoot,
yeah. And I'm wondering, I thought to myself, and here we are back to that topic. Are we looking for the differences, even within our own Presbyterian family? Are we going to focus on the differences or something more important? And I'm not saying
It's
that's
tough when the splits are recent. I got a joke that applies just to that. I printed it out. You
wanna
probably
read
heard
your
this one
joke?
before. I'm going to read my joke.
go.
Okay.
All right. I once saw a man on a bridge about to jump. I said, "Don't do it." He said, "Nobody loves me." I said, "God loves you. Do you believe in God?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Me too." "Are you a Christian?" He said, "Yes." I said, "Me too." Have you heard this one?
No.
No.
I said, "Protestant or Catholic?" He said, "Protestant." I said, "Me too." "What denomination?" He said, "Baptist." I said, "Me too." "Northern Baptist or Southern Baptist?" He said, "Northern Baptist." I said, "Me too." "Northern Baptist, Northern Conservative Baptist or Northern Liberal Baptist?" He said, "Northern Conservative Baptist." I said, "Me too." "Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region or Northern Conservative Baptist Eastern region?" He said, "Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes region." I said, "Me too." Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1879 or Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912? He said, "Northern Conservative Baptist Great Lakes Region Council of 1912. I said, "Die, heretic," and I pushed him over.
Oh my gosh, so true.
Yeah. So
That same joke could be written about Presbyterians.
absolutely.
We've had so many splits.
Just replace the words. And like
So
I
many
said, listen,
splits.
maybe that guy's a lot busier than I am, and we had enough email going on back and forth, but it was just coincidental that I put that in there, and there was no,
And it was like, oh,
crickets
so you're
ever
a
since.
heathen.
Yeah, you're one of them.
Yeah.
You're one of those.
So when the splits are more recent, they're also not just about theology, but they're about politics.
Yeah.
And
Right.
any splits about Have you noticed this? We can't really talk
Well,
about our political
less
differences.
about politics. I mean politics, but it's social issues.
You're
Yeah,
right,
it's
yeah.
not like
That's
the
a better word
Presbyterian
for it.
Church split about Republican and
No,
Democrat
gotcha.
or
Yeah.
something like that.
Yeah.
We've split as Presbyterians about
Whether
women,
Megan
about
can do her job.
Yeah.
about women,
Right.
about whether Cheryl could be on the session. I mean, it's not just even pastors.
Yeah.
But about women, about LGBTQ, there's
All of it.
historically split about slavery. I mean, there's been split after split about interpreting what we do in light of the scriptures with social issues. But because we've kept splitting, we keep getting farther and farther apart
Yeah.
with each split.
But I guess the splits, 500 years ago over like things about communion, were they
Right.
equally as nasty?
I wonder.
Yeah.
They're like,
Oh, I'm sure.
"How dare you believe in the real presence instead of the spiritual presence?"
Yes. I'm probably worse.
Because
Probably
there's
works.
not as much stuff going on.
Yeah.
Is everyone in the Trinity equal, or is there a hierarchy within it? Answer. Yeah. Like big fights back in the day.
Yeah, so our more recent fights are a little more raw.
Yeah, more recent for everybody. Yeah.
Well, here's a plug for our church. I think we do
Yeah.
pretty good at
Yeah.
He gives us all a B along with
maybe even B plus. We might be scratching the A minus, but I do think it feels less exclusive in here, and the
Good.
people that I brought in, whether it's from the community or extended family or friends, they have always left saying that. So
That's awesome.
yeah, I get a good feeling about that, and I know that's why it works for me. I'm not sure I could fit in too many other places and really feel comfortable, honestly.
Well, we're super glad that you're here.
Yeah.
And
It's cool.
ending on a plug from the church feels like a good place
I
to
know.
stop.
Yep,
Feel
yep.
like
Oh my gosh, we went for almost an hour.
I know. See, Rick had so many good things to share with us.
New record, Rick.
Yeah, good
All
job.
right. Well,
Yeah.
I hope you edit it.
Nope,
No way.
this is how it goes.
No editing.
Thank you to Rick Anderson for being on Church Chat today. We hope you'll tune in next week. I don't know that we'll be able to talk about monks and monasteries, but we'll have a new topic. So
We'll figure something
if
out.
you have any questions for Rick, put them in the comments. We'll
Any
let him
questions
know.
for us?
Yep.
Do the same thing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll see you guys next week.
Bye.
Bye.